Now you may begin.
Okay, so meeting is convened. Has everyone read the minutes? Any feedback from? No, do we have Jeffrey and Clint?
Nope, the only one that, with us is Bill. Nobody else is with us.
Maybe
Jeff, I had one question on the minutes. And at the end of the minutes, it said it was the schedule for the next call for the next meeting for tonight, and it said 6 o'clock. So my question is, do we need to update that to 6:30 since tonight meeting is at 6:30, or is that just what it was at the time of the last meeting and we leave it as is?
It was the statement as it was at the last meeting. So that's a factual statement. And then the conversation with the chair, I'm going to do a 6:30 meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't sure whether if we had to update that or not. Okay, sounds good.
That was my understanding.
Quite a good pickup, I would say. Thank you. So, given that that's the only inaccuracy, everybody, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I assume that with the updates,
Sorry about that.
and Jeffrey joined us.
Thank you.
We just approved the minutes from.
Okay, from last session. Okay,
Did you have any feedback?
I did not.
We've already taken the vote. So. That's what I thought. I guess with the updates, that will probably give us the information in regards to the rates as well. Right? We were going to do some research, and that's I think that's a proposal. Proposal today.
Yeah, that's on the agenda. We want to just give you an update on the procurement process with a consultant.
Yes.
And if you want.
So we released a request for quotes and received 2 quotes back that were unfortunately above $50,000, which is both our article amount, but also the procurement threshold for the way that I procured it. So I'm speaking to those 2 consultants right now to figure out what was driving their price so high, to see if it was something that we can pull back on to adjust the scope a little bit, or if that's kind of the market rate of what we're looking for. And then we'll try to go out to bid again. That way we can hopefully get somebody on board in the next, I'd say 2 months.
Can I ask how much over 50,000 the quotes were?
One was 57, which is pretty close. So I think I can figure out what was driving that. And the other one was, don't remember off the top of my head.
63.
63, yeah. So they
Okay.
weren't drastically over.
Great.
There was a survey component that for both of them was incredibly high, anywhere from like $15,000 to $22,000. So I think that's kind of what's driving it. So I want to dig into why their cost to survey the community was so high.
Do they give a breakdown like an hourly rate?
They didn't give an hourly rate, but they gave a rate per like task. So I'd broken it down by like the survey component, the report component, and stuff like that. So I do want to talk to them and just kind of see.
Okay. I guess from a statement of work perspective, I'd be really curious to see how they hourlize their rates.
I can ask for that.
We prefer not to have contracts because then they never seem to end.
Mm-hmm.
So it's rather
It's
a
not-
fixed price proposal.
Okay.
But understanding the length of the project is such that we need to compensate them as they do work. So we break it out into tasks. So generally for smaller procurements that are meant to be durations of less than a year, it's a fixed price.
Okay.
If you're not able to negotiate to getting it down to that 50K threshold, does that mean that you can't get an agreement with these guys and you have to move on to it, or can you modify the proposal?
As Cecilia said, we're looking at 1 or 2 options. Either modify the proposal and go back out by taking something out of the request, or we'll have to go out as a bid, because that's the other issue was under state law.
50K threshold.
Yes, it has to be a sealed bid process. And if we decide to go with the sealed bid process, it might be necessary to supplement the project cost with our operating budget. And that conversation we'll have with the town manager and the select board.
And
no, we're using our own resources. We
Okay.
need extra money that's adequate finance. The next thing on the agenda is for the superintendent to give an update.
So our big story continuing is kind of personnel. We obviously are kind of blessed with a really strong staff, but when we promote internally, we're not adding really personnel to the operation. So we've been short-staffed. We're still short at this point, heavy equipment operator and one laborer. We were able to obviously promote Justin to the assistant superintendent. You met him last time. And then we promoted one of the heavy equipment operators who's shown a real interest in, moving up in the public works operations. And he was interested in taking the scale desk job, which is, really important for us. It's an air traffic controller for trucks, equipment, but also it's someone who compiles a lot of data for us. It's someone who, really is interested in a bunch of divisions within public works. So that's very encouraging, but it hasn't really added strength to our team. We have a number of personnel who had scheduled time off, either family issues or whatnot. So we've been sort of struggling just to stay afloat. Some of our projects, haven't really moved forward. In the notes, it talks about the website upgrades. I've got a quote and a company, but I haven't been able to work with Justin to really get a path forward to work with that company. I think it is going to be a valuable upgrade. I just don't really want to pull the trigger on it just to check a box off. I want it to be done right. I think the website is it's an opportunity to kind of reach people who want to know more about the recycling. So, I think also each website can kind of drive information locally about, reuse organizations that are local, Needham and West Roxbury, Dedham. So we have to kind of feed that information into the website upgrade. That's not an automatic, just, build out from this company because they're in California. Beyond that, recycling, the rates, the commodities aren't really doing particularly well. We're still getting marginal revenue for cardboard, and everything else is a cost. Single stream is still very much the highest cost. Paper, is about half of the cost of single stream, and the commingle is in the middle. Our MSW volumes, Cecilia and I are monitoring going into the end of the fiscal year, our volumes, because we typically have two very high rates in terms of tonnages in May and June. June is almost always the highest month because of cleanouts, school cleanouts. We've had pretty heavy weeks, a very heavy March, but a light April, which is unusual. Typically it'd be the other way around, but we're really monitoring the budget going into the end of this fiscal year. We look like we're pretty well set up, but it would probably be down to the last couple of days and managing how we haul trash in the last couple of days just to keep it under budget. We're really up against it with a bunch of other of our purchase orders, just in terms of like tire replacement is very costly this year. We've been really diligent about getting the facility swept regularly by the highway department, using a magnetic sweeper to pull up nails or other screws, debris out of the roadway, but the cost of tires is really high. So that's definitely affecting our budget. You know, other than that, we're seeing a lot of favorable response from the Frida resident compost. So we get a lot of positive feedback on that. Swap shop is booming, really a lot of activity up there. And then the food waste program, we were able to expand. I think when we talked last, we talked about the High Rock. So the High Rock, we started that program right after April break. And then 2 weeks after that, we were into the Pollard, which we really didn't think we were going to get in there just because that age group is a little wild. So I was down there on the opening day of it, and, you know, really strong staff there in the cafeteria, and, you know, obviously the teachers and the support staff there. And I thought they did really well. You know, there were some kids who kind of were making a little bit of fun of the program, but we got a lot of positive response. And just within the last day, I have my first outreach from one of the educators who wants to work that program into the curriculum and discuss environmental impact. So that was kind of my dream all along, is that we could make this into something that the kids would be interested in. So the Pollard has turned out really well. I think they're really going pretty strong at the High Rock. And in terms of the cost per ton, it seems like as the programs expand, the efficiencies there and the prices are dropping. And so, you know, the high school and the RTS are still the most efficient programs, but the other ones as they build out are going to get better. And, you know, I'm thinking that these programs are going to need to be relaunched in the fall. But, you know, our kind of hope is that really strong showing in the elementary schools, High Rock, that it's going to rise into the junior high. The junior high kids are going to be accustomed to it at lunchtime. It's not going to be unusual, even though that's a tough age group to manage, that they're going to be okay with it. And then it's just going to move into the high school. Anecdotally, I've heard the high schools become a little bit hard to manage, and that the student ambassadors aren't really involved anymore. But maybe next fall we can reload that. Yeah, and then I've been mentioning that it's great to be in the schools and meet the students and kind of help work with the staff down at the various schools, but it's also very difficult being short-staffed up at the transfer station, because I can provide support for my staff operationally. And it's hard not to be in both places. So, you know, I would like to be doing a little more of both, but I think, relatively speaking, we're doing well at, you know, both places.
It's not apparent to the casual observer, let me say, that you're short-staffed at the RTS. It seems to me like it's really humming there. It just,
There's a lot of hard work.
Looks as good as I've ever seen.
Can you run through the head count? So you said, do you have 2 open roles then?
Right. Typically, we have 2 laborers, 4 heavy equipment operators, 1 scale specialist, and a working foreman. Okay. Then on top of that, you have 2 management. Justin, the assistant superintendent, I'd be the superintendent. And typically in that role, my role would be more like budget and money management and personnel issues. Justin's role would be operations. The foreman is very directly, he's a working foreman out, you know, up among the operators. 1 operator is tasked with the townwide collections in all municipal buildings and schools. So that operator is off site for a lot of his day, but as he comes back, he'll be available. You know, the 2 laborers generally work in tandem with the operators to be opening, you know, loading containers on trucks, hooking them onto the roll-off trucks, swinging doors, you know, processing of the trash requires a front end loader, a crane operator, and a trailer pit to disperse the material in the trailer, and then someone's in the tractor to bring it around. It's a 2-person operation to tarp the trailers, and that's ongoing all the time. Plus, we do quite a bit. It falls to the laborers quite a bit, but the heavies are also responsible. We just need to oversee how traffic and people are using the facility. A lot of times, we just need to have eyes on how people are using the bag containers. And I think there was a post on social media about not thinking that anyone's policing the bags. And I think we sometimes feel like we're over policing people because, we don't want to be heavy handed, but we need to convey why we do what we do with the yellow bags. And so we really try to be kind of judicious about how we talk to residents, but we're constantly policing that.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this a few times, just that fine line of how much you beat people up, and it's not, it's not fair to your team to basically have to be out there, waving the flag. And I think the website, in conjunction, the website will probably help out a lot.
Yeah,
because it is an education resource, right? You can drive people to really understand without your guys having to sit there and harp about why it's important.
Right. I agree.
I disagree.
About the website?
Yeah, I think that, the non-compliance of the yellow bags is not an ignorance or information issue. If people are trying to get away with things, they know what the rules are and they're just violating them. They think they can get away with it until someone calls them on it. Right? How many people can you think come in this town don't know about the yellow bags and where to buy them? And there's signs all over the place.
Yeah.
$5, yellow bags, $5 fine, $6,
$10.
$10, right? And how the sign's been there, for instance, it's been $5. No one lives in this town without knowing the yellow bags.
Yeah.
People, I'm a landlord. New people walk in. Sometimes I tell them that, or sometimes they, new neighbors come in and move by a house. Oh, what's the culture? Oh, you have to buy yellow bags. It takes them about 2 weeks before they hear what the culture is in Needham, that you have to, you have to put your stuff in yellow bags and bring it to the transfer station. And then some people tire, oh shit, I don't want to do that. And who do I hire?
Yeah.
No one's ignorant of the rules.
No, I'll give a perfect example. I happen to have a colleague from work who was absolutely clueless that there was an option to use the scale. And he had a couple of not gigantic things that he wanted to throw out, but he simply had no clue about the scale element. And I think that that's tied hand in hand. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to make an excuse for people being lazy and breaking the rules, but I think that there are people that if they knew about the scale would actually, from a regular resident perspective, would actually use that.
I agree. The scale is a little bit more complicated.
But it's a perfect example. He would have.
The website would be helpful in that. But the contamination and the violation of the yellow bags and throwing things in the wrong places is not a function of ignorance.
And I mean, we try to be a presence. I think that, if there's maybe one person by themselves, they might, try and stare down. Maybe if it's a younger person who's newly hired, they might think, oh, I can just
do whatever.
Do it. But if we have a couple of us out and about, and I mean, we definitely have a team mentality up there, and we, couple people, and they start looking over and they see one person in a vehicle loading here who stopped and is kind of peering, putting eyes on it, and I hate to say it, most people who are there are going to be there next week. And if I miss my opportunity to talk to somebody who maybe uses a black bag, I will probably remember the vehicle and I'll approach them next time and say, hey, maybe you don't understand why we use the yellow bags. And then, I might launch into a
fist fight.
I tend to use boredom as a technique. I start becoming pedantic and just, rolling out.
Keep them there an extra 10 minutes because that'll really tick them off.
Yeah. I think compliance is better than it has been.
Okay.
I do. When I look at because that's something that I typically do. If I'm going to look and kind of take a barometer reading on the facility as I walk past each open container, if I see like yellow with one black bag, that's better than it used to be. We still have the problem on the far corner. It's an easy spot to kind of park your car, and those containers are pulled during the week because it's hard to. Police it is the word. It's hard to police the two that are on that first drop wall. But on the Saturdays when we're busiest, we place those containers there, and we have fairly steady monitoring throughout the entire day. You know, and I think people, if they know, plus if we talk to them on the drop wall, they're among their resident peers. If they're kind of
embarrassed.
Well, I don't want to publicly shame anyone, but if I say that is part of
You do
keeping
publicly shame them,
but they, you know, they should be other residents, you know, kind of stop and notice.
You mentioned that.
I would like you to publicly shame them.
Throw paint. I had a couple of additional questions. Paint, are the dates set for the paint?
It's third Saturday of the month, April through October, and that's a standard.
And what about costs around that? Just out of curiosity, is that
it's not going up that much, not as much as just hazardous waste.
Okay.
Hazardous waste has gone up a lot. There was a fire in a facility somewhere in the short Midwest, like maybe Ohio, Indiana area, that was at a major facility, and then there's a fire at the Clean Harbors in Braintree recently, but paint hasn't seemed to, the costs on that aren't that much. And actually, surprisingly, I think our volume is kind of dropping a little bit. You know, we used to do 2 to 3 of the cubic yard containers on a busy opening day, and we did 1 cubic yard this last April. So it's possible that there's some leveling out of clean outs from these houses and stuff.
And you mentioned the clean outs. Does Olin do they do their own thing? That we don't have any Olin kids that are.
They have a sticker. Their facilities has a sticker, but they don't use this that much. Okay. But
on the school program for the food recycling, is there any financial benefit to the schools for that? Because I know when we looked at this a few years ago, because they had already had their contracts based on a number of pickups per week, that by removing the weight from the waste stream didn't really affect the finances of the schools at all. Is it the same now, or has anything changed?
I don't think that the food waste collection is offering cost savings yet, but it definitely could. Needham's putting money into food waste. Boston's putting a lot of money into it. And I think this is something we talked about last week, if facilities start getting built closer to Needham, like in that 495 corridor, it's going to bring down our costs, because our material currently gets sent to Leominster and then shipped to a dairy farm in Maine. If you can take that last trip to Maine out of there, you're going to save money. So if there was a digester somewhere in that 495 area, that's going to bring it down. And one of the topics we talked about last time is that trash costs are just going to go up. So as those two things go in two different directions, food waste gets more efficient, hopefully the cost comes down, and as trash becomes more difficult to process locally and has to go out of state, that cost will go up. So hopefully the efficiency will come then, but it's not currently a cost savings.
Okay, but for this pilot program that we're doing this year, we're essentially doubling the cost of the disposal, because the school is still paying for their regular solid waste disposal.
That cost all comes
and now we're
out
incurring additional costs for the food waste disposal.
So all those costs come out of the RTS. Our budget covers the collection and processing of all school trash.
Okay.
And our budget covers the cost of the food waste. So there is a reduction. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like say 6 tons reduced per month from the high school. That's 6 tons that we're not processing as trash from the high school. But it's not that big of a difference at this point.
Okay.
But even if you extrapolated that, you've got 5 elementary schools that feed into 1 high school. If all 5 elementary schools were participating, you're looking at another 6 tons plus just, and then the middle school between the 2, probably another 6 plus tons. Along those lines, I had 2 questions, and I think we might have covered this last time. I'm sorry. Compostable plates or trays, is that something?
So it's kind of like they don't add fuel to the methane generating process of anaerobic digesting. So they are kind of a zero. They take up space without providing any of the material that's going to generate the methane that is the reason why you have an anaerobic digester. In terms of people's motivation to start a food waste program, getting rid of styrofoam trays and replacing with compostable trays seems to be such a huge driver that I'm reluctant to jump into that fight at this moment, because most people want to do a food waste program just to get away from styrofoam. Does that make sense?
It does.
I mean, I don't know if it makes sense, but I mean, it's kind of a touchy subject, and I don't think that it's.
I guess I'm curious, like, and I feel like I should know this because I got 2 kids, but how, like, are dishes then washed at the school? I'm just wondering about the overall impact.
I think if you want to ask where I'd like to go, that's where I'd like to go. I'd like to get. And I'd like to get trays that are washed every day back in schools.
Instead of having compostable trays.
Yes.
So I think, Matt, if I just chime in, but this whole program started off at the Hillside School before it then got moved over to the Williams School. And the Williams School was designed for food waste in mind, since it's the newest school that we have. I believe it was designed with the facilities to wash trays there, and then COVID happened. So I think it's restarting that conversation with the school department's food waste people.
I guess I'm just like, I can see kids having, for them making it easier drives the compliance on. I'm not going to make fun of something if I just take my tray and just put it and just make sure that the little milk carton isn't on it, that goes into the other. And I just think that I don't know. It's an opportunity to get people hooked on the right behavior and thinking about the right behavior. And then the amount of water that probably gets used to wash trays and all that stuff is just, and again, I'm probably being too crunchy granola right now, but the other thing is, what about getting restaurants to participate in the food waste? Because Massachusetts has
they'd have to do their own program.
They would.
I mean, they could use the same vendor. In fact, I know the same vendor is looking to do supermarkets around here. And I think that kind of efficiency is the kind of efficiency.
Yeah.
So as people see Needham doing this program and we bring in a truck, then maybe the supermarket in town says, yeah, let's have them collect here. Suddenly their route goes from a huge route looping through multiple suburbs to maybe they come down to Wellesley, Needham, Newton, and they go back. And then the company is seeing all this opportunity because all these anaerobic digesters need feed. They need to be fed a lot of material in order to produce that methane, to produce the electricity. If that feed is reliable, they're going to start building the facilities. But if it's spotty or sporadic, then they're going to not put money into it because it's a lot of money to build one of those digesters. And I don't have the exact money. This was supposed to happen in the early 2000s. And all the engineering companies kind of backed out because they couldn't get a reliable source.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of it.
Jenny, I think, to respond to sort of your interest in, efficient, the food waste and designing it to schools, Matt was talking about staffing and having a passionate, staff leader to that and getting the kids involved, and it's fluctuated, by the staffing, or passionate staff when they move on to the kids. But if you got that passion and you got it into the culture of the school, you got the kids getting excited about it and contributing that, they might even problem solve it a little bit, at the school, and what would help with that culture and the process and staffing, if Matt was freed up to do what he said, he'd like to be able to spend more time doing that, right? And not spend so much time in operations and there because he's sucked into, because he's short-staffed as well. So yeah. I think we have to talk about, think about that, that's an education thing for the town, and town meeting, if you get that across, because again, my editorializing is, how people don't like to pay for getting rid of their trash. They want to pay attention to it, yeah. But if we get that sort of out there in a culture, it leads into two questions I have for Matt, for you. In the beginning, you're just talking about some of the difficulties you're having. The one with staffing and filling in those lower slots that come up, that entry level slots that come open as you promote within. And so, how much of that's not. I'd like to know how much across the board in the town are we short staffed? How much? And are we seeing it in other departments at DPW? Where they're shortchanged. You sometimes share resources between the departments at DPW, and everybody's short-handed, and on paint days you do that as well.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
So how much of a department DPW issue is it across all those, and even town-wide? The short staffing, and how do we address that? We, of course, it's station-wide. So do we have to think about, we don't have to pay better wages, because no one's filling any slots like that as well. And then that also speaks to, you have a problem with tires, they're more expensive, right? How will that, you're not the only department that uses tires, right? And DPW is not the only department that does that as well.
We go through a lot of them.
So now again, it's education, how, where's the FinCom in when we go and ask for, more money for tires, and things like that as well. And again, that becomes, here we're advisory committee. We hear this at this ground level kind of thing. How much does this, trickle up as far as these costs, that unexpected increases in costs?
Yeah,
that'll go across the board.
We've been doing a lot of interviews. Cecilia's got a kind of a broad plan to interview a laboring position across multiple divisions kind of at the same time. We've done, multiple interviews. I think I've had 5 laboring interviews scheduled over the last 4 or 5 days. Unfortunately, 2 of those candidates just failed to show up, which draws from, my time away from the facility. So, hiring is tough, but, we are, doing okay. It just, it's a tough stretch when we also had approved time off at the same time and a few medical or family issues. So I think for us, it's a stretch that's, been a little difficult. I see us kind of coming out the other side, not maybe with more personnel, but having people come back. The heavy equipment operator, we're going to continue reaching out. A lot of the staff promote the position with people they know from other municipalities because they like working for Needham. And I think, there's been a lot of work on the culture of the town and the culture of public works. And that word kind of gets out. I also think the pay scale is favorable to people wanting to transition to Needham. So we have a lot going for us. But
we've been shorthanded a long time.
I would say the staffing vacancies in DPW across the board are not unique to the RTS, and they're not unique to Needham. Right. It really is an industry-wide thing for public works right now. Especially with just CDL, I'd say a lot of people in my generation were pushed into college and pushed away from the more skilled trades positions, skilled laboring positions. And we're seeing that now there's just a lack of qualified people in the industry to take these positions. So we are just stealing from other communities at the moment. Your guess isn't the shortest staffed in DPW.
Yeah, we're not. I'm not using it as an excuse either. It's
and I can tell you, I'm Shane Mark. I'm the assistant director for Public Works. This is a nationwide issue. This isn't a Massachusetts issue. This is nationwide. I just attended a SNOW conference in April, and I was having these very conversations with my equals from across the country where everybody is having a tough time bringing a workforce in to replenish the people who are retiring, because quite frankly, public works is a field where people tend to come into public works, spend 30 or 40 years, and then they retire. We're at that age where we're seeing a tremendous amount of people retiring at the end of their cycle for their careers, and it's attracting the new blood into the public works arena. But this is a nationwide problem that we're having.
Well, that's why I asked. I think we could assume, that that's the answer. As an advisory committee, how sensitive is FinCom, to these things when you're asking for, more money.
So I think I can speak to that, and then to the staffing. So we had an increase in our budget, and every single increase that we had that was part of our general operating budget was approved by FinCom. So we did not have any obstacles when it came to, in certain areas, pretty high cost of inflation items. Luckily, we have lots of different divisions with different factors, so not everything goes up 11 or 12%. And so there's some other items that help moderate it out. But we had, I would say, scrutiny, but support when we went through the budgeting process, which is what I would have expected. On the staffing side, I will say I've been with the town for quite a while.
Yeah.
And the RTS has had the least amount of transition that I've seen in my tenure in the past few years. I think historically speaking, it was really the entry point into DPW where people would come, and this goes back to when Chip was here. People would come, that was their entry point to work for the town. It was a Tuesday through Saturday job, which at the time was seen as being less desirable. They'd work at the RTS until an opening came up in water and sewer or highway or parks, and they would leave immediately. That has been the opposite of what's happening right now. So we're in a really positive cultural place, I would say, at the RTS in particular, where people don't want to leave the RTS for other opportunities. In fact, it really is the internal raising of our existing staff who we've trained up for succession planning that's caused the vacancies. The problem is in the marketplace, there aren't people coming from outside to backfill them. So that's one of the struggles. And I think broader, it's construction overall, but in the public sector, we're not competitive. We are competitive wage with other municipalities. So we are, I think, offering a fairly strong wage. We're not the highest. We're certainly not anywhere near the lowest. So we are attractive for other communities, and we're stable. And Needham tends to staff on a, we don't have any fluff in our staffing. And I think that's what Matt is experiencing right now. We make sure that when we're in more difficult times or hardier times, we're not over staffing, so then we have to cut later on. It does make it challenging when we have vacancies. But what we're finding is, and we've had a few people leave for the private sector wages for people with commercial driver's licenses and particularly heavy equipment is significantly higher than what we're offering in the private sector and the public sector. And additionally, the state and the federal government have added additional requirements to getting a commercial driver's license. It used to be that we would train internally, usually it was summer help or a laborer would come in. We had a few internal trainers. We would have them work with our staff and we would go send them out. The state is now requiring a formalized training program, which we're in the process of establishing in town. But if we send somebody out, that's $5,000 to $6,000 for training. And I imagine for a Class A license, which is what we prefer at the RTS, because of the equipment down there, we're now looking at the $6,000 to $7,000 range. So that's made it harder for individuals on their own to go get licenses to become our applicant pool. And then also when we hire people, that's a consideration that we have to have when we bring people in. So future years, next year, we've talked about this internally, but I can see our training budget in DPW going up quite a bit and having to defend that in front of the finance committee because we simply can't get people who've been trained outside of the town to come here.
Kind of along the same lines, the economist man starts wondering, it becomes a race to the top, right? So one town starts to pay more. It's happening in the restaurant industry. You can make $4 more as a chef down the road. And then the restaurant that just had a vacancy because of the $4 turns around and bumps their, and it really is a race to the top. So there's a huge risk in letting the market work its magic, right? Especially if you're losing people to the private sector, because people talk and people see it. There's nothing we can do about the inflationary.
And I know restaurateurs who, have a problem where they have to pay their dishwashers more than their chefs, because, right? And they says, I'm only doing that until my chefs find out, and then I have to pay them, right?
And those guys should be using compostable plates. Bring it back. There we go.
Hey, thank you. It's good. It's kind of nice to be on the advisory committee here. You can't publicize, hey, we have the most attractive, department, there as far as employees.
So people talk.
But yes, right. But it's nice to know as an advisor, we're an advisory committee to the department that has the most attractive culture within the department. And something if informally as a committee, if we can, get that out across, that could be helpful as well.
Could you guys have a floater or a couple of floaters that when you do have somebody who's out on FMLA or whatever, that you would be able to actually just, you've already thought about it. Okay.
They have like a high vacancy rate and then they ask for additional FTEs. So we're in like a tricky position. The time to have that would have been like 5 or 10 years ago when we were able to get staff in more. We're sort of playing a catch-up game across the entire department. But yeah, we've thought about a whole bunch of things. We're talking about, we've had the highest rate of loss, I would say, in the RTS has been the laborers that come in. And oftentimes it's because they just don't know what they want to do. They haven't worked in construction for very long. They come into the RTS because that's historically where the vacancies were, although less so recently. And then it's like, oh, well, maybe I want to go do work in water and get a water license, or I would rather work in roads and see the roads go. Or what you have right now at the RTS is a few individuals who are extremely passionate about trash recycling and sustainability. And so we try to get them to move to other roles and they're fixed. So we've talked about trying to hire at the entry level in particular we do have a summer program, which I guess I can plug. We have many full-time employees who started off as summer workers who are now full-time people. It's a great opportunity, not just to make some money over the summer, but get to experience what the town has. And that's been a pipeline as well. So I promote that. We've had that historically under enrolled the last couple of years as McDonald's and other places are paying wages that are more comparable. So those are opportunities that we've had, and we've been talking about how we can move people around, because sometimes, we hire somebody who's 19, 20 years old and they don't really know what they want to do. They just like, maybe working for a town job, and they can kind of settle into a particular niche within the town.
And then the only other thing that comes to mind is there's got to be a way that if we're spending $5,000 to $6,000, and again, we're advisory, but $5,000 to $6,000 getting a class A or 7 to 9 or whatever it is, that those people just don't turn around and go down the road to the next town and basically essentially take advantage of the fact that we paid for it.
We haven't had one yet, so we haven't had that experience, but we'll see. I will say historically, I would say our laborers do stay for a period of time. We're not seeing that group move up quickly. It's usually somebody who's been here for a long time, has a lot of licenses, has a lot of experience, and then they're able either to get an opportunity maybe closer to home or an opportunity in the private sector.
Mr. Chair, do you want to go to the rate proposals?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Matt.
Sure.
All right, so we were looking at some of the rates. I'll start with the much more straightforward ones first. I think we had talked about this the last time we were here, is just removing the dollar fee for the disposal of fluorescent tubes. It's really just costing more to administer than the actual revenue that we are collecting from the fluorescent tubes. And then the second fee change is to increase the disposal, the fee to dispose of printers from $2.50 to $5. The current fee is not enough to cover the cost of disposing them. You guys are getting some pretty heavy printers, and it is by weight, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so $5 would cover the average printer.
It's more aligned with the standard size of a printer.
So those are the quicker ones. And then the third one that we're looking at is to increase the tipping fee from $140 to $200 per ton. The tipping fee hasn't been adjusted in quite some time. It looks like about a decade. And also we found, I attached a chart that shows other communities that have allow for, that have a tipping fee at their transfer station. We're the lowest by far in the area. We're proposing to go up to 200. It puts us about in the middle. And then with increasing the minimum to about a $30 minimum, that is primarily aimed at residential cleanups that may not have a full ton of trash. So, you know, but it's not reasonable for them to dispose of with the pay-as-you-throw bag, kind of like you were referencing earlier. We did a lot of research. We were looking at just kind of where we wanted to sit in neighboring communities. We do think that we are bringing in a significant amount of commercial waste because our fee is lower.
What is this, I don't quite understand this. Wellesley's two-tier.
It's any mixed load. So something that would be, you know, if it were, you know, bags of trash along with some wood waste and you know, maybe some other debris, they call that a mixed load. So almost everything that they bring over the scale has that mixed load fee of $200. So that's an automatic starting point. And then it's 160 a ton. So a ton of trash in Wellesley isn't actually 165. It's you know, 365 for a ton, whereas our proposed would be 200. We don't really.
So it's not.
It just represents kind of the difficulty of handling, you know, mixed loads. You know, we process, you know, our trash with the trash dozer, kind of compact it down. But there's a cost associated with that of labor, fuel, and equipment.
So our Needham proposal would equate to the mixed load.
We take a mixed load without any additional fee, and it's currently 140. Okay. And we go up to 200, and the thought process is it's like a low pressure system. Needham's a low pressure system, so all the trash is kind of flowing in. We're low in a lot of things, and you know, I think that's fair. You know, we really try and make sure that it's just residents, but the commercial activity, you know, they could do a run where they pick up some things in Needham and maybe pick up some things in Newton or you know, Waltham or something like that, and bring it back to us. And we're processing a lot of trash that's likely brought in from, you know, other communities. And if that's the case, we just need to be attracting the, you know, taking the right fee for that, and also, you know, recognizing that we've created, with that low fee, we've created an incentive for people to bring in a lot of material from outside the town. So I think it is, I think it's an effective rate change.
Do we know how our mins compare to other people? You mentioned $30 basically being the min.
Yeah, the few that we found with minimums were up to $100 or $230 minimum. So it would be a much lower minimum than other communities. But I think, Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we're not seeing commercial haulers really utilize the minimum. That's really residential.
Oh,
yeah. And we definitely try and be informative. If somebody's coming over the scale and you could see, you know, the small compact car, you know, they're not, and we'll just write the weight down on a piece of paper. When it comes to 120 tons, we'll charge them a large bulky or a medium bulky, whatever it is. And then we just tell them why the scale is used for larger.
Yeah.
And, you know, some people just like the convenience of the scale, just go over the scale and, you know, empty out. But most people who use it more than, you know, once a month know how to use it correctly.
Any other questions about the change in fees? Okay, so I need a motion. We're bringing this to a vote, right?
Yes, I believe you're gonna recommend it to the select.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the fees as proposed by the superintendent.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Unanimous?
So, Mr. Chair, we do have a meeting scheduled for June 6th. So that's next meeting. Do you want to get another meeting in the calendar?
We're scheduled for June's. No, what are we going to before the select board?
Select board will be on June 27th.
Do we need to meet on June 6th before the selection? Will we have anything before or?
There is nothing pressing. We had scheduled that in case.
We scheduled that in case we had a larger discussion here
on the rates.
On the rates and whether with this the select board pending.
Right. So and it's fairly close to now. So I don't think Matt will have any additional information to share with the committee on activity.
I think since the vote, the rate increase was unanimous, and I think we can before that the
so
meeting.
Perhaps a short meeting right before the select board meeting on the public hearing on the 27th. The select board meets at 6 o'clock. So perhaps convening at 5:45 on the 27th.
Sure. Will it be a problem if we didn't have a quorum? If we didn't have a vote?
No, as long as the chair is present before the select board, that's the important thing, but should have team support there would be nice.
Is that, you said that's fine?
I've always felt that from the committee, so.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Okay, so Tuesday, June 27th at 5:45.
Okay, so I will update I believe there's an Outlook invites, so I'll update that the 5:45 on the 27th. The other question is, do you want to get another meeting on the schedule for
September?
For September?
Yes.
Just so it's in everyone's calendars. So I'm sure the committee doesn't want to meet the day right after Labor Day. So
Well, how about the 19th would be our regularly scheduled
Yep.
time, right?
yes, the 19th part of the event.
And it should September 19th.
Yes.
September 19th is fine with me.
What time? What time?
6:30?
6:30 it is. And we have nothing else for the committee's consideration.
Jeff, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.